couple of things for optimizing workspace that are grounded in neuroscience and physiology. I've talked before about the fact that when our eyes are directed upward, literally when our eyelids are open, no surprise there, and when our eyes are directed upward, it creates a state of heightened alertness. And this has a relationship to the brainstem neurons that create alertness and their control over the muscles of the eye and, believe it or not, the eyelids. Now, it's not the case that if you are absolutely exhausted and you need to feel more alert, that looking upward is going to make you feel wide awake, although it will help support your levels of alertness. The point here is that you can optimize your workstation in a physical way that leverages this aspect of the visual system and your level of alertness. Since most of us want to be awake while we're working, try and position your screen or your tablet, whatever device you happen to be working on, at least at eye level and ideally slightly higher. Now, if you think about it, most people are not doing this. Most people are looking down at their computer or tablet or are angling their eyes at their screen at about 30 degrees. That is not going to support heightened states of alertness and optimal attention. In fact, the opposite relationship between eye position and alertness is also true. When we look down, when our eyelids are slightly closed, it tends to decrease our levels of alertness and increase our levels of sleepiness. I really want to emphasize this, that there's a bidirectional or reciprocal relationship between the brainstem areas that control alertness and the eyes, meaning how alert you are controls how open or closed your eyes are. No surprise there. But also that how open and upward directed your eyes are will increase your levels of alertness. And if your eyes are pointed downward and your eyelids are hooded, like they're slowly closing, like Costello's always are, you'll feel more sleepy, especially if you're somebody who tends to have that mid-morning sleepiness or mid-morning crash. So what I do is I have a standing desk, but I also prop the computer up such that it's at least at eye level. And I haven't figured out yet how to develop a workstation where the computer is above me. I think the only way to really do that is actually to tilt one's body back, but actually that's not a good idea either. They have done studies recording from areas of the brain associated with alertness, areas like locus ceruleus and the so-called reticular activating system. What they found is that depending on how reclined you are or upright you are, you will decrease with reclining and increase with sitting forward your levels of alertness. So body posture and whether or not you're upright or reclining will impact your levels of alertness in the predictable ways. And where you position your eyes, whether or not your eyes are upright, so to speak, looking up or directly forward, or looking down, will dictate whether or not you are feeling more alert or more sleepy, respectively. So try and arrange a workstation or a position of your body in your chair or your standing desk, whatever it is, that allows you to work with a heightened state of alertness. This is really, really key for me because I found that when I would sit down, not only would my hip flexors start to get sore, I'd feel tight in the back, etc., but if I was staring down at my screen all day, or even for short periods of the day, I would start to feel sleepy and I couldn't figure out what was going on. I also thought maybe I needed glasses. I do wear readers at night, but it was really a problem. And simply by getting the screen directly in front of me at eye level, it's been completely transformative. So we're now at the description of my day and these protocols in which I would do a 90-minute bout of work. Now, why 90 minutes? Well, the brain is going through these 90-minute so-called Ultradian cycles throughout the entire day and night. Every 90 minutes, we shift over from being very alert to being less alert and then back to alert again. Here's how it works. At the start of one of these 90-minute Ultradian cycles, my brain is not quite engaged in whatever it is I'm trying to do. Now, oftentimes I have things jumping into my mind. I've got distractions, etc. I'll talk about how to deal with those distractions in a moment. But I set a timer for 90 minutes, and I try and get a strong bout of work done inside of that 90 minutes with the full understanding that the entire 90 minutes is not going to be uniform in terms of my ability to focus. There will be kind of peaks and valleys within that, but that 90 minutes is about what the brain can handle in terms of a dedicated effort for high degree of focus. Some people can push out a little bit further. Some people can't handle more than 10 minutes, but that's what I'm striving toward. You'd be amazed how much you can get done in 90 minutes if you are focused. So how do you increase that focus, and how do you use the timer feature? Well, you can combine those. I use a program called Freedom. It shuts me out of the internet completely. So that means no checking the markets, no checking social media, no checking the news, no checking email, none of that. I get a dedicated bout of work done. I confess, I don't allow myself to go to the restroom in that period of time. Here's an interesting little tip that's grounded in physiology. You have a direct neural connection from your bladder to your brainstem areas that increase alertness. This is why when you have to go to the bathroom, when you have to urinate, it is extremely agitating, right? It can be very, very agitating. I'm not encouraging you to get so agitated by filling your bladder so much and resisting going to the bathroom that you are uncomfortable and can't focus. But I generally will just drink liquids and work away, and I won't walk away to go use the bathroom unless I absolutely have to. Sort of odd that we're talking about this, but this is one way in which I've learned to funnel my attention into whatever it is I'm doing. Because as you all know, the moment you sit down to do some serious work and you flip off the internet, all of a sudden it's as if the phone has a voice. It starts calling you. It's almost as if the restroom has a voice. But we all are familiar with the fact that if we are focused on something, all that just kind of melts away. So the goal is to get into what I call the tunnel, to really get into a tunnel of quality work. The brain loves that state, but it's very hard for many of us to access. My phone is absolutely off. It's not on airplane mode. It's absolutely off during this time. If I've been struggling with that, and I confess, there are times when, for whatever reason, something going on in life, it's been harder to put away the phone. I will sometimes put it in my car. I used to joke that I used to throw it up on the roof or something like that. Look, I've done, and I suggest people do whatever they need to in order to self-regulate that activity. And if you're somebody that feels that you absolutely need to be on your phone and on the computer for this work bout or the work that you do, well, that's a different matter altogether. This is just simply how I work. So I will do 90 minutes, and I do set a timer, and I turn on the program Freedom, locks me out of the internet. If someone rings on the doorbell, I will often shout, not coming to the doorbell, leave it there. I mean, unless there's a real emergency, I'm not going to step away from that work. I learned how to do this when I was a graduate student under different conditions where I used to slice brains on what's called a microtome. So I used to spend time just cutting very thin slices. It's like a deli slicer, but for a brain, of various types of brains. And I've sectioned through a lot of brains. And we had a rule, which is that when the blade hits the brain, you don't stop pulling, even though it's very, very slow, even if a nuclear bomb goes off. Even if a fire alarm goes off. Now, I don't want anyone, burning to a crisp because they didn't step away from their workflow. That would be foolish. But that's the mentality that I've embedded in myself, that there's nothing more important than what I'm doing in that 90-minute block. And that's what works for me. You can try various other things. That's what works for me. In addition, I use low-level white noise. This is something that is supported by quality peer-reviewed data. We covered this on the episode on hearing and balance, but it turns out that white noise, which is essentially all frequencies of sound, or all frequencies of sound that we can perceive, mixed up kind of randomly, there's no structure to it, turned on at a low volume, not with headphones most of the time, puts the brain into a state that's optimal for learning and workflow. And I covered 2 papers during that episode, one that showed that indeed, brain areas involved in attention, brain areas involved in focus and cognition and memory, those are engaged to a greater degree when there is low levels of white noise playing in the background. The other paper that's really interesting did brain imaging and showed that areas of the brain that are associated with dopamine release are increased by low levels of white noise. Dopamine release is associated not just with pleasure, but with motivation and craving. So everything about this 90-minute block, from the low levels of white noise to the position of my computer, how I'm standing and where my eyes are positioned, is geared towards putting me in this tunnel of work. And I have to say that while it can be a challenge to try and achieve this state and this tunnel of work, some days you start to get kind of addicted to it. It feels really good. It's like a workout for the mind. And it is something that as you exit that 90 minutes, you really feel like you've accomplished a lot, because often you have. And it just feels deeply satisfying. And I'm convinced that that's because of the release of neuromodulators like dopamine and the norepinephrine that's circulating in your system. And I want to be clear that I'm not perfect about this 90 minutes. Occasionally I get drawn away. Occasionally something will happen, or I'll go use the restroom, or Costello will have a need, or somebody will have a need that I will have to respond to. But I really try and achieve this most, if not every day that I'm alive, because for me, that work session is kind of holy. It's where I set up a relationship, not just between me and the work that I'm doing, but between me and my ability to control my own state of mind using these various supports of the white noise, et cetera. But really, those supports are peripheral to the fact that I'm creating this space. I'm funneling my brain into a state rather than allowing whatever events and contexts on social media and elsewhere might be occurring in the world that would yank me out of what for me is my purpose and my mission in life, which is to do the sorts of work that I do.